All right, good morning, everyone. It is 11:01, and we will call the Electric Utility Board meeting for October 20th, 2020 to order.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The Lubbock City Council is now called to order.
Okay. I'm going to do roll call real quick. I do believe we have Brandon, a few via Zoom, 0 via Zoom right now, okay? Therefore, I think Kevin's the only one. Nope, Jane, Ms. Henry as well, is not present at the time. So we will wait and see if they join. Just wave at us if you see someone join, Brandon, for us. We'll go from there. Public comment, I believe we have one gentleman, Grant, signed up today. Mr. Gerlich, if I pronounced that correctly. Is that correct? Yes, sir. We will come on up and limit you to 3 minutes. If it's something posted on the agenda, we may have a response for you. If it is not, there will be no response. But thank you, sir, for being here.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the board for taking a moment to let me weigh in on this. This is for Untitled Project, the McCullough substation over at Tech Terrace. I am the president of the Tech Terrace Unit Neighborhood Association. I'm also the community engagement manager for Outreach and Engagement at Texas Tech. And I just want to talk a little bit about the mural project. I want to acknowledge and thank Councilman Griffith for his assistance on this and Matt Rose for his help on this as well. At one of the meetings, we had one of our neighborhood members comment that the substation, thank you, that the substation was sort of an eyesore, and what could we do to beautify it and make it look nice? We got in touch with Councilman Griffith, and he got in touch with Mr. Rose. We discussed options and came up with the idea of painting. And then, of course, there are safety issues of various things that we needed to go over. But one thing led to another. One of our neighbors is Andrew Martin. He's the Associate Dean at the School of Art at Tech. I mentioned a mural project. He said that would be great. Maybe I can get my students involved. I went to Hutch, talked to Heidi Dye, the principal. It's a certified art school. They'd love to participate as well. So one thing led to another. So we collaborated, and the neighborhood association is going to take care of all the supplies, paint, and anything associated with that. So it's a community involvement with Tech Terrace Neighborhood Association, Texas Tech, Hutchinson Middle School. They collaborated on designs. So it's really, and we're also working with Adams Paint, so with private businesses involved. So it's really a win-win-win situation for everybody. The neighborhood gets something pretty out of it. The students at Tech get to work with students at Hutchinson Middle School. The kids at Hutchinson Middle School get to take ownership in this project because the substation's right there. So I just wanted to just put that out there to consider that. Also, by the way, murals are a deterrent to graffiti and vandalism. Just, I thought I'd throw that out there. A lot of cities are doing that. There is a website called antigraffiti.org if you all want to look into that, but cities all over the country are looking at murals as a way of preventing vandalism. And of course, it takes pride and ownership in the neighborhood. So just want to thank you all, and just keep that in mind when you come up to that, and please support it. I think it's a great project that we can all be proud of, and good for the community, good for the city, good for Lubbock Power and Light and our neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Gerlich, for being here. I know we'll talk about that 4.1 in executive session, so I think we'll hold our comments till then, correct?
Okay.
Ms. Smith?
Any questions? No? Okay.
Do it. Oh, I know, yes, when we come back into open, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you all very much.
Hey, thank you for being here. We
You all
appreciate
have a
it.
good day. Have
Yes,
a
sir.
good meeting. Take care.
Is anyone else signed up, Mr. Rose? No. No one by email either? Has anyone joined, Brandon? 0 still. All right, keep the streak going. All right, we are now recessing an executive session in accordance with 1 VTCA Government Code 551.086 on competitive matters of LP&L, 2 VTCA Government Code 551.071 seeking advice of and consultation with its attorneys, 3 VTCA Government Code 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, and value of real property, and 4 VTCA Government Code 551.074 to deliberate the appointment of a public officer or employee to the EUB. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. City Council will hold an executive session today for the purpose of consulting with the city staff regarding competitive matters of the public power utilities under Section 551.086 of the Texas Government Code, pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers, and hold consultation with attorney under Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. The purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property under Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code, and personnel matters under Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We will now head upstairs, second floor, and see everyone up there. Thank you.
Portable chiller that they brought in, so got pretty good response on that story as well. There was one on page 22. There was a story about that was featured in the news media, and I forget, I'm not sure what channel it was, about Hurricane Laura support. And so there was a nice story there, and of course Brady Anderson, who was here at the last meeting, was interviewed for that story. So he's becoming quite famous now. Over on page 33, the customer service recap metrics, there was a couple of them that I wanted to point out to you. In the upper right-hand corner, the number of customer payments by payment type, you can see that cashiers has gone to 0 and will stay there because we no longer have cashiers in the new facility across the street over there. So everything, if folks want to make payments, they have to use the kiosks over there, and of course we've got folks that can help them use the kiosk, but we don't have cashiers at the new facility. So you can also see the green curve went upwards, which is electronic payments, to reflect that, you know, folks are using the kiosk. The call center activity metric over on the left-hand side, the second one from the top, quite a bit of improvement there. Our attendance has improved some. We've still got some folks out due to COVID or quarantine because of close activity there. But anyway, it's improved. We're still not where we want to be, but it's moving in the right direction. So I wanted to point that out. On page 35, our AMI report. If we hadn't have grown since we started, we would be finished by now, but we've got more meters set than what we originally contemplated, but we still have additional meters to cover the increased population, and most of the remaining meters will be installed by LP&L employees. So this work is substantially complete. There are some network mitigation issues that we're working on. Try to improve the network and the response rate of meters communicating back. On page 37, the water AMI, it's kind of a similar story to what we had on the electric meters. We've installed 86,000 meters altogether. At the project start, the total water meter population was 85,000. So we've exceeded the original amount, but because Lubbock is growing, we've got more meters to set. Expectation is to be substantially complete in the next month, so good progress being made there. On page 39, the Customer Information System project recap. As you recall, we've pushed the launch date to December 7th, and user acceptance testing has been very active over the last week or so, and will continue until October 30th. And so far, I'm hearing that is going very well. Reports are being written. We've got, I think it's 13 reports that are critical that go live. We've got 4 of those written and tested, and there's more to be completed in the next few weeks. So I know they're focusing on those reports that have to be written for go live. And that's it for my comments on the written report. I did want to make one other comment, and that's that by virtue of a prior resolution that the board passed, I am supposed to report to y'all when we've had a railroad commission or any other regulatory matter that's in the delegated authority to me. So we did have one additional Railroad Commission fine, $1,000, for a situation where our guys were out there working on installing a pole or doing some digging, where they had an open ticket. The locator came out and was locating adjacent to where they were working, and they knew they had another pole where she was working. And they said, well, while you're here, go ahead and locate that other location. So she did. Unfortunately, she located it incorrectly, and we dug and hit, I forget what his gas line, I guess it was gas line. Since we did not have a ticket on that location, we were in violation of the ordinance. So we've not the ordinance, but state law. So we have done some additional training with our staff, and before you dig, that you've got to have a valid ticket, locate ticket called in for each location where you're working. So hopefully that will be the last of these issues. So unless there are other questions?
Questions, comments for Mr. McCullough?
I think Mr. Avent will give the report, construction report.
Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon, Board.
Good afternoon.
So we'll go to your first page of the executive summary. A few changes to this from previous months. The main is going to be right in the middle, which is the voltage conversion. It's going to be identified by yellow, starting roughly the last week of December. If y'all remember the previous two EUB meetings, we had a note or a little caveat there that schedule was still under review, and we have removed that. We are considering this schedule now our baseline for that portion of work. So that's really the biggest change between then and now. And wanted to give a shout out to Michael Coomer with the substation group, Paul and Hassan from the engineering group. They spent a lot of hours over the last month and a half on fine tuning that schedule. So we're able to hang our hat on it now and hold the overall team accountable for the voltage conversion, which the schedule you have in front of you. A few other small tweaks, jumping back up on the schedule to about the 5th line down, you'll see the co-op line swap. We have pushed that out by roughly a month. That's due to some outage constraints and the drilling of that structure. If y'all remember back, we did have an oblong anchor bolt cage. We're having to marry that back up now. So to get that installed, we had to take some additional outages, and that's all that really is indicative of. The substation's coming along just fine, actually a week early. We'll go to the second page. A few call-outs on the status report there in the middle. So the first 4, those are the Encore T-line projects. In the previous EUB meetings, I've mentioned that the right-of-way was tracking slightly behind schedule from our math. They were shown to be on schedule. We can confirm now they're on or slightly ahead of schedule. So Encore, over the past 30 days, has been very aggressive with the right-of-way acquisition strategy and have brought that schedule back in alignment. So just quickly wanted to call that out to your attention. And then one thing that is not on here that was on previous agendas was the Dunbar and Yellow House transformer pads. So we had called out that was going to be a medium risk, that we wouldn't, the ability for us to get those pads installed ahead of the transformers, we were kind of nervous about that just because concrete has to cure so long. We've actually poured all of the pads. They'll be well in advance of the transformers. So that risk has been mitigated. When the Siemens transformers arrive, the pads will have plenty of cure time to set those transformers. So again, another risk that is no longer on your tracker here. Mr. Chairman, that's the gist of the updates for this month, unless anyone has any questions.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Avent.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Bertram, item 9.
All right, good afternoon. Just going to give a quick update on the COVID metrics, collection metrics that we have been tracking over time throughout this event. I'll just point out a few of the items on page 30 of your agenda book. There is a graph, the second one down on the left side is our past due, total past dues, where you saw that dramatically rise beginning in March. Once disconnections were re-implemented gradually, we started to see that number drop off. It's kind of stabilized at an elevated number, but we would expect as we continue to collect on these accounts that'll start to come down, or probably relatively slowly over the next number of months. Right below that graph is I'm sorry, so used to that mask, I forget to take it off. Never thought I'd say that, but anyway, excuse me, the assistance that's been provided since March is close to a little over $1 million at this point in time. You've seen some pretty substantial numbers of customers impacted, on 1,200 to 1,300 customers a month, total to the tune of about $1 million who've been assisted throughout this time frame. So I think that's very helpful to a lot of the customers. Along the bottom of that page are some new graphs that we've added for this month that we haven't had in the past. We have begun implementing disconnections for the customers who have really basically not been paying anything since the very beginning. We started with the customers who have the longest outstanding balances, and so we're currently very gradually implemented that process. There are about 3,800 customers that, on average, over the last month, that could have been disconnected at that point in time, but we began gradually implementing that, no more than 100 per day. That helps to gradually move into that, to help remind customers, give them time to get caught up, but also helps our call center, who has also suffered somewhat from lower levels of staffing, to be able to keep up with the call volume. So over the next month, we will ratchet that up a little bit more, no more than 200 a day, that we'll be working if we can accommodate that level. But still, we're encouraging our customers to seek assistance, to get caught up as best they can, to avoid, and really to get set up on payment arrangements to avoid getting disconnected. The three graphs to the right of that, along the bottom, are basically the trends on customers that are late fee eligible. You can see that spiked in the March and April timeframe. It came back down. It's starting to rise a little bit again. A lot of that's probably due to the summer high temps and the combination of getting caught up on past due amounts plus the new bills. And also payment arrangements established. We saw a pretty good lull as we stopped disconnecting for a period of time, but that has since come back up to basically historic levels. And then also the number of payment arrangements that have been broken, that rose dramatically in the March and April timeframe, fell back down, but now we're seeing that rise again. Again, I think that has a lot to do with the summer timeframe and people having larger bills than what they're used to, and having some difficulties there. So I know there's still folks out there having some difficulties. We're working with them as best we can, but we're still trying to get them caught back up. So that's kind of an update on the COVID situation. Let y'all ask any questions if y'all have any.
Questions or comments? As long as they're working with us, haven't broken payments or promises, I mean, we're working with them, correct? It's the
Right.
ones that have
We're
actually...
absolutely doing our best to work with them and give them every opportunity, but at some point, ultimately, we unfortunately have to disconnect them, and a lot of times that'll help them get their
Once
payment
they
in
go
quickly.
dark, right,
Yes,
then
yes. Mhm.
the decision has been made, gotcha.
That's right.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
Next, if you're okay with me moving on.
Yes, sir.
Next section is the financials.
Looking for News, she's not here.
Too bad for you guys, Renu's not here today, so you're going to be stuck with me. It's going to be dull and dreary with me, I'm afraid. But I'll just highlight a few things. Thankfully, Renu did put the slides together, so they were ready for me. Cash currently is at 89. This is for August, 89 million. Now, this is lower than really it is in actuality. Let me explain why. Because we are under, obviously, building a lot of transmission projects right now and spending quite a significant amount of money. What we do when we are spending money on those projects, that comes first out of our operating cash, and then later we reimburse ourselves either from bond funds or we issue notes to cover that. So there's a lag, a 1 to 1.5 month lag. And when you're spending $15 to $20 million a month on capital projects, the cash tends to look low, even though it's really just on a lag situation. My estimate, where I believe we will end the year on a cash basis, where we're 89 million today, I would expect will be higher than we were last September, probably in the $116.2 million range, once we try to sync up the timing of those capital expenditures and the cash, the issuance of the notes and bonds. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Go back. The receivables, you'll see those are at $28 million at the end of August, which is a little bit elevated over where we were in September of last year. I did look at the prior September, however, so September of 18, we were at about $30 million. So we're right in the middle of where we've seen ourselves over the last couple of years. Again, that's seasonal. As the summertime ends, we typically have the larger bills that have gone out over the last couple of months, and receivables typically rise in the August and September timeframe. On the non-current assets, you'll see the restricted investments a couple of lines above that red box. It's about $65 million, which represents not only bonds, but also an escrow account that we have set up for 2 months of future capital expenditures on the larger 345 kV transmission project. So last year in September, we had about $81 million. The majority of that was bonds. About $68 million of that $81 million was in bonds. The rest of it was in our debt service reserves. But this year, we only have about $24 million remaining in bonds. So we've gone from 68 to 24 million in bonds outstanding. But we have increased our escrow account to $31 million, where it was really didn't exist at this time at September of last year. So really, it's a little deceiving to see that it doesn't look like it's gone down much, but really the bond funds have been spent fairly quickly this year, what we had remaining. And then finally, the non-current assets at the bottom under the capital assets, you'll see the construction in progress line item, $158 million compared to $43 million at the end of last year. So you can see the amount of construction that's been recorded at this point through the end of August. In the liability section on page 68, I just wanted to point out, you'll see the notes payable on that first section, 6 or 7 lines down. Notes payable is at $72.5 million compared to about $2 million this time last year. So we've issued a significant amount of notes to help pay for these transmission assets. We did just issue an additional $48 million of notes in September. So you will see that number over $120 million at the end of the fiscal year. So you can tell that we are going like gangbusters on spending money on these large transmission and distribution projects. A couple other items I'll point out. Bonds payable, right above that red box is at $10 million, down from about $18.5 last September. If you'll recall, we paid off the debt that was associated with the Excel distribution asset purchase that occurred in 2010, so that was paid off. So that dropped our next year's debt payment basically from the 18 to the 10. On the income statement, metered revenues are down about $18 million this year. You'll see $194 million this year compared to $213 last year. And we've obviously implemented a number of rate decreases related to the pass-through of power cost since last year, and so that it changes there. The overall operating revenues are up slightly, about 2% over where we were this time last year. On the operating expense side, personnel services are up a little bit, but that's because we have one more pay period through August of this year than where we did in last August. So once that all trues itself up, payroll should be basically right in line with where it was last year, just a slight increase. Basically, you'll also notice power costs are about $117.5 million for both this year and last year. So it's rather surprising that they're so close between the 2 years, but we're right in line with last year right now. That change in net position at the very bottom, you'll see in August we were at $20.2 million, where this time last year we were at $15.3 million, so an improvement there. And then finally, the cash flow. Operating cash flows, both month-to-date and year-to-date, are positive. Financing activity cash flows are negative, and a lot of that has to do with the spending, and I believe at the end of the year that'll be a lower number just because I did just issue the $48 million in notes, which will bring that number down. So I would expect it to be pretty close to really the principal and interest that have been paid out. It'll be a negative financing activity cash flow. And then in investing cash flows, That's driven by the sale of investments as we continue to build additional projects, capital projects. So at the end of the year, again, I would expect that we'll have a net increase in cash. Right now, it's showing a net decrease, but we'll have a net increase at the end of the year once everything is trued up from an expenditure standpoint on the capital. So quick highlights on all of that. I'll turn it over to you guys if you have any questions.
Questions? Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Andy, refresh my memory on that term revolver on the note deal. How's that going to show up in the audit report? Is that going to be in long-term debt, or is it going to be split, or is it all going to be current because it's a construction?
It'll all be
note, or-
current
Okay.
for this year. So yeah, so the working capital won't look very good this year. But,
Okay, that's my
the
point,
intent, and I don't know, I haven't talked with the auditors about how we might disclose that, because ultimately the intent is for that to
roll
be
it.
the long term. And so it'll look very differently after we issue the takeout of the notes with the long-term debt. But yeah, my understanding is this year we'll be recognizing that as a current.
I mean, I'm sure our rating agencies are aware of our plans. I just,
Yes.
when you see it in black and white in a financial statement, then, it's just making sure we're all on the same page in the hymn book, so.
Before we entered into that agreement with Bank of America, who is our provider, we did have the conversations with each of the rating agencies, and they understood the short-term implications as well as the long-term of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Bertram.
All right, thank you.
Bring us to item 11, presentation on the downtown electric utility relocation project update. I think Jared Hughes is going to do this for us. Welcome, Mr. Hughes.
Good afternoon. Good to see you all again. I'm here about once a year to make a little discussion about downtown, and it seems like every time I come, I'm in a new building. So pleasure to be in the new City Hall building here. Okay, so just a brief overview here. Talking about this CIP that we have for downtown. The scope does, as we discussed before, kind of includes the engineering, planning, easement material acquisition, construction labor, facilitate reroutes, upgrades, and new installations downtown for new distribution, as well as existing distribution. And overall, justification is basically to just upgrade our infrastructure, improve the system reliability, and to help address the needs of individual projects as they occur downtown. Budget-wise, we've appropriated $4.8 million up to this point. We've got $650,000 available now in the current fiscal year, and we spent encumbered up to almost $4.8 million. And so a little map here kind of showing, this is what we're calling the alley conversion phase 1 project, which we did start early this year. We actually have a contractor on site right now working on these yellow highlighted blocks that you see here before you. They are through almost 6 of these blocks currently, and they are working to basically put in new duct banks, new switchgear, transformers, cable, you name it, they're putting it in for us through these alleys, and so that our crews can actually come back after and cut services over to individual businesses and remove overhead facilities where we are present. So it's like I said, we've got 5, almost 6 blocks complete now. Deerwood, who's our contractor doing the work, they're going through and putting all this work in. The last thing they will do is actually pull cable. So a lot of these blocks, we're waiting on them to fully complete their work before we begin converting customers and removing overhead, except for one block, which we'll get to in a moment. So on this phase 1 project, we had 12 blocks initially targeted for relocation of these facilities. That's been trimmed down to 10. We've had a little bit of lack of cooperation on 2 specific blocks, so we moved on from those, but we still have 10 that we're working on now. Overall, the property owners have been pretty cooperative with easement acquisitions, number 1. And then also just dealing with the inconveniences of just, people tearing up their alleys and roadways in front of their businesses. So that's always an inconvenience, but they've really worked with us well on that for the most part. And we do expect to have our equipment, or the contractor should be completing their work by the end of this year, is the current expectation. And then, as I mentioned before, our crews will be converting these customers over from overhead to new underground services. And then once that is complete, we will remove our overhead facilities. So kind of a before and after pictures for you. We did kind of locate one block just because of its I guess, geographic location. It's kind of sandwiched between the new South Plains College, the old City Hall building, and the new Cotton Court Hotel to the north. It's also directly east of Avenue Q, so it's kind of a natural progression of development from North Overton through downtown. And so we basically pushed our contractor to go ahead and pull the cable in first on this block so that our crews could convert services over and go ahead and kind of make this a showcase alley, so to speak. So you guys are welcome to go take a look anytime. There are still poles and communication attachments through the alleys, but it's, as you'll see in these slides, there's a much, from an aesthetic standpoint, there's a huge improvement. It's kind of a shot looking back to the east from Avenue Q. There's a kind of behind Grimes Insurance back over here, and a law office looking east. Here's a look coming from Broadway, looking back to the south. So you can see a large riser structure we had there previously, several transformers, cross arms, and some very tall poles we actually had through that area. That used to be a main feeder line that fed all the way down Avenue O, back from the north all the way going south. Same general location looking south there. There's also an old banner pole that was used previously by when we had 4th on Broadway that came through that portion of Broadway that's also been removed. Pretty big difference here in this one. This is from 13th Street looking north. We had a very large feeder riser structure there from 2 different circuits. One was actually a backup feed to the old City Hall building. All that has since been removed. Guy anchors, those 2 bowls and risers were completely removed. And then here again, same area, you can see the transformers that are no longer on the poles, and the poles have been topped, basically cut above the communication attachments. And then looking back to the west, just behind Grimes Insurance, this old riser structure there that fed the old City Hall transformer. All these services have since been moved underground. And a shot looking back from Broadway again, looking south. You see the event center there, and so definitely improvement. So what's next? We've got phase 2 of the alley conversion project, and we are looking at 12 additional blocks similar to the first phase. This current fiscal year does not include funding for that phase, but we are planning to budget for approximately $2.5 million for that phase in the upcoming fiscal year cycle. Any questions?
Question for Jared? Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, so the Phase 1 target was, how many blocks was it? 10?
We
Wound up
looked
being
at
10?
12, but we trimmed it down to 10.
So if you go back to that slide that had the yellowed,
Yes.
because I forget where, so when we're talking about phases, are we talking about the original phases of downtown redevelopment, or are we talking
No,
about?
these are different. These are
Okay.
LP&L phases 1 and 2, so it's totally separate from the phases 1 through 4 that the master developer
Okay.
brought forward several years back.
Okay, because I was looking at where those blocks were, and those got into that different phase under that plan.
Right, yeah, it's a little bit of, we kind of touched the main core of the central business district, but it's totally separate from the phases that were outlined by the city and the master developer, but we're still working within those same areas that they were focused on.
So basically from 10th Street to 16th. Okay. Have to get oriented there by,
Yeah, so if I can give you a little bit of reference, the block on your, of course, the middle block there by Avenue O, that is the block between Cotton Court and the old City Hall building. And so the one due north, that's where the old Parks and Rec building for the city is located.
okay, yeah, so,
yeah.
okay. So Main Street, that's, the south side's facing Main Street. So that's the, yeah, okay.
Yes,
So the
sir.
back part of that is the old Parks and Rec.
Right.
Okay, I'm with you now.
It's also worth noting too, the block, I don't know if I have a laser pointer on this thing or not, but how best to point that out? If you follow Broadway, not the large block there, but the next block that's highlighted in yellow back to the east,
Yes, sir?
that block is not currently being looked at for any work because the map hasn't been updated. This was sent to us by our engineering consultant several months back, but that we've since nixed that block due to lack of cooperation from the property owner. That block is actually the parking lot directly south of Metro Tower.
Okay.
So
The black marks.
the black marks, those are subfeeder ties along the street right-of-ways that were drawn in by our engineering consultant.
Tell me, am I missing a block? I'm only counting 11 yellow blocks.
That's what, yeah, that's what I was saying. Really consider that one block that off of Broadway is nixed. The
Okay.
remaining are 10. Yeah, I apologize for that.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Jared, will you go back and try to get easements on those two blocks that the owners did want to do over a period of time?
So the one block that we're talking about here, we actually looked at two different locations. The initial property owner was very uncooperative, to put it lightly. And we approached another property owner to use one of their parking spots, and it's a restaurant, and their parking was very limited to begin with, and they also did not share any willingness to cooperate there. We do have plans for that block, potentially whenever the old LBC is torn down for what seems to be a park, for what I'm hearing. We might be able to secure some location for a transformer easement on that block, in which case we can use that to feed into the adjoining block and try to get them put underground. But for now, just because we can't find easements, we have to punt, essentially.
What's the issue? They just don't want the green box sitting there?
The second one that we went to was just, lack of parking. They had to give up a parking
Parking,
spot.
yep.
And to their defense, it is very limited. I'll give them that.
Right.
The other one, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but the owners are the new owners of the Metro Tower building, and they were, I don't want to give a whole lot of detail. They were, just suffice to say, they were extremely uncooperative. The phone call I had with them was not very productive at all, so we decided to go another direction.
Okay.
Yeah. Not everyone cooperates, unfortunately.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Thanks for your work on this.
Yeah.
And the presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, brings us to item 12. We need to consider a resolution regarding a possible study of net metering rates as contained in the electric rate tariff schedule of LPNL as adopted by the City Council of the City of Lubbock and report findings to the EUB. We have a motion to consider that resolution. That dies by lack of motion, so we'll punt on that one.
So moved. I said so moved.
Okay. We have a motion by Kevin. Do we have a second? Dies for lack of second. Thank you, Kevin. No discussion there. Let's push that on into infinity. 13, consider a resolution recommending the City Council, City of Lubbock for 5 appointments and/or reappointments as applicable to the EUB in accordance with Section 2.03.415E of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lubbock. We have 5 appointments. 4 of those are renewal terms for Dan Odom, Kevin Mavahan, Gwen Stafford, and Jane Henry. Each individual's completed the paperwork with the City of Lubbock and the boards. So we'll have those 4 appointments to be reappointed. And then we also need one more reappointment. Everyone should have the list in front of them that is preferred the EUB as one of their choices to be on there. So with that, I would entertain a motion for the 4 and the extra individual that we'll recommend to the City Council.
Mr. Chairman, I move forward with the 4 to be reappointed and Solomon Fields to be the new appointment.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Schultz. Have a second by Mr. Taylor to reappoint the 4 individuals with expiring terms here in November, I believe, going forward for another 2 years. And then Mr. Solomon Fields to fill Kelly's position that, I don't know, a few months ago. So all those in favor do so by saying aye.
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 Opposed by the same? Kevin? Thumbs up. All right, motion carries 7-0. Item 14, discuss and take minute action relating to the date of the regular EUB board meetings for November 17th, 2020, December 15th, 2020, and January 19th, 2021. There are some conflicts all the way up and through the State of the City address in January. So if everyone has a moment, proposed meetings for November 17th, 2020 would be changed to November 13th. Regular scheduled time, 11 to 2. The December 15th, 2020 meeting would be proposed to be changed to December 11th from 11 to 2. And then January 19th, 2021, which is the State of the City address, we propose to have that after that. That generally runs, I think, from 11:30 to 1 or so. So we propose that time probably from 1:30 to 5 that afternoon on the 19th. Yes, ma'am.
It stays the 19th, but it's later in the day?
Yes, ma'am. So I'll go back over them real quick. November and December will be our regular scheduled times from 11 to 2, but on November, it'd be moved from November 17th to November 13th. December 15th would get changed to December 11th. And again, both those dates are same time and different dates. And then on January 19th, we leave it that date. We just have the meeting that afternoon from a 1:30 to 5. Does that work with everyone's schedules? Basically, November 13th, December 11th, and January 19th. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Boatman, a second by Mrs. Stafford. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same. Carries 7-0. All right, consent agenda items. We have items 15 through 25. I think everyone's had a chance to read through those, look over them. Is there any that would like to be taken off there? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent items 15 through 25. Got a motion by Ms. Stafford. Got a second by Mr. Schultz. All those in favor do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same. Carry 7-0. And that is all the business today. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.